I'll never forget the way my son looked at me that night, eyes burning with 17 years of built-up resentment as he slammed his fist against the kitchen table. "You were never my real father," he spat, "and I never wanted you to be." The college acceptance letter I'd proudly presented now lay crumpled between us, the scholarship offer that would have covered his education at State bent awkwardly across the university's letterhead. "I'm going to find my biological father," Marcus declared, his voice breaking despite his attempt to sound definitive. "He wouldn't try to control my future like you do. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I stood frozen in our small kitchen, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead like it always did when the weather turned cold. For 17 years, I'd been dad to Marcus, coaching his Little League teams, helping with science projects, teaching him to drive, sitting through every parent-teacher conference. Now suddenly I was just Richard, an imposter who'd stolen the role that apparently belonged to someone else. "Your biological father made his choice a long time ago," I said, working to keep my voice steady despite the tremor I felt building in my chest. "He signed away his rights before you were even born." Marcus laughed, a bitter sound I'd never heard from him before. "Mom would have told me if that were true. She always said he was a good man who got caught in bad circumstances. That's why she gave me his last name instead of yours." The truth was more complicated than Marcus knew. His mother Janine and I had agreed we'd tell him everything when the time was right. But Janine had died when Marcus was 14, taking with her the gentle ways she would have explained things. For 3 years I'd been trying to find the right moment, the right words. Now it seemed I'd waited too long. "There are things you don't understand," I began, but Marcus was already grabbing his jacket from the back of the chair. "I understand enough," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Mom kept his letters. I found them last week in the storage box in the attic, the one you told me not to open." My heart sank. The box contained Janine's personal papers, including letters from Cameron Wells, Marcus's biological father, letters that told only half the story. "Those letters don't tell you everything," I said, taking a step toward him. "Please, sit down. Let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me my whole life? That you've kept me from knowing my real father? He wants to meet me. He's been trying to reach me for years." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in as Marcus's accusations hit me like physical blows. 17 years of parenting, of loving this boy as my own, seemed to evaporate in the heat of his anger. "That's not what happened," I said, but Marcus was already heading for the door, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "I'm staying at Damon's tonight," he said. "And tomorrow I'm going to call the number in those letters. My real dad lives just 2 hours away, did you know that? All this time he's been right there, waiting for me." The door slammed behind him with a finality that shook the house to its foundations. I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the life we'd built. Family photos on the refrigerator, Marcus's basketball schedule held up by magnets, the height marks on the doorframe showing his growth from a small boy to the young man who'd just walked out. Each one a memory that suddenly felt hollow. I picked up the crumpled acceptance letter, smoothing it against the countertop. Full scholarship to State University's engineering program. Exactly what Marcus had been working toward for years. At least, that's what I'd thought. Now it seemed he had other plans. My phone buzzed with a text from Damon's mother. "Marcus just arrived. He's upset but safe. Giving him space tonight. Call you tomorrow." At least he was safe. I sent a quick thank you and sank into a chair, trying to process how our life had imploded in a matter of minutes. The box from the attic. I should have gone through it years ago, should have found a way to tell Marcus the whole truth about Cameron Wells and the choices he'd made. But Janine and I had agreed to protect him from that knowledge until he was old enough to understand. I climbed the stairs to the attic, the pull-down ladder creaking under my weight. The box sat open on the dusty floor, its contents disturbed. Photographs and papers were scattered around it, as if Marcus had rummaged through in a hurry. I knelt beside the mess, gathering the papers together. Among them, the faded blue envelopes of Cameron's letters. There were 6 of them, all postmarked from about 7 years ago when Marcus was 10. All sent after Janine had married me and we'd become a family. All making grand promises about reuniting. about being a father to Marcus, about the life they could have together. What the letters didn't mention was the 12 years of silence before them. The child support payments that never came, the court hearings Cameron never attended, the restraining order Janine had eventually been forced to get. Beneath the scattered papers lay the folder Marcus hadn't found or had chosen to ignore. Inside were the court documents, the police reports, the hospital records from the night Cameron's drug-fueled rage had put Janine in the emergency room when she was 6 months pregnant with Marcus. The night that had finally given her the courage to leave. The protective order that had kept Cameron away until Marcus was born. The termination of parental rights Cameron had signed in exchange for not facing charges. It was all there, the dark truth Janine and I had decided to shield Marcus from until he was mature enough to understand the complexities of addiction, abuse, and redemption. Because there was redemption in this story too, Cameron had eventually gotten clean, had built a new life, had reached out years later wanting to make amends. Janine had considered it, had kept the letters while she decided what to do. Then her sudden illness had taken that decision away from all of us. I gathered everything and brought it downstairs to my office, organizing it chronologically. The complete story, not just the convenient parts. Tomorrow, I would try again to talk to Marcus, to help him understand that the truth wasn't as simple as real father versus stepfather. That family is built on more than biology. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake replaying the argument, thinking of all the things I should have said, all the ways I could have better prepared for this moment. Dawn was breaking when my phone finally buzzed with a message from Marcus. Going to meet C. Wells today. Don't try to stop me. No, Dad. Not even Richard. Just a cold declaration of intent. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, please be careful. Call me if you need anything. I love you. The message showed as read, but no reply came. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did even when I was genuinely ill, and spent the morning in a daze of worry and regret. Around noon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Is this Richard Harlow? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Yes, who's this? My name is Elaine Wells. I believe my husband Cameron is meeting with your son today. My grip tightened on the phone. Yes, that's right, Marcus is. He found some old letters. She sighed heavily. I was afraid of that. Look, there's something you should know. Cameron isn't. He's not well. He's been struggling again. The weight of her words hit me immediately. Struggling with addiction, you mean? Yes. He was clean for nearly 8 years. But after losing his job last year, her voice trailed off. He's been in and out of rehab twice already. Right now, he's in one of his everything is fine phases, but where are they meeting? I cut in, already reaching for my car keys. Some diner off Highway 16, I think. The Blue Plate. Cameron left about an hour ago. I knew the place, a retro diner about halfway between our town and where the Wells family apparently lived. Thank you for calling, Elaine. I appreciate it. Mr. Harlow, she said before I could hang up, Cameron isn't a bad person. He makes promises he can't keep when he's like this. I don't want your son to get hurt. Neither do I said, and ended the call. The Blue Plate Diner was about 45 minutes from our house. I made it in 35, breaking speed limits the whole way. The parking lot was half full when I pulled in, my eyes scanning frantically for Marcus's beat-up Honda Civic. I spotted it parked near the back, and beside it, a dusty blue pickup truck I didn't recognize. Through the large windows, I could see them sitting in a booth, Marcus across from a man who, even from this distance, bore a striking resemblance to him. The same strong jawline, the same way of gesturing with his hands when he spoke. It was like looking at an older version of my son, or rather at the genetic blueprint from which he'd been created. I sat in my car for a long moment, unsure of what to do next. Storming in would only alienate Marcus further. But after what Elaine had told me, I couldn't just drive away and hope for the best. Finally, I decided on a middle approach. I would go in, sit at the counter, make my presence known but give them space unless I saw signs of trouble. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. A few heads turned, but not Marcus's. He was too engrossed in whatever story Cameron was telling, leaning forward across the table with rapt attention. I slid onto a stool at the counter, positioning myself where I could see them but not be immediately obvious. The waitress approached with a coffee pot. "Just passing through?" she asked, filling the cup in front of me without waiting for an answer. "Something like that," I said, my eyes still on Marcus and Cameron. Now that I was closer, I could see Cameron more clearly. He was in his early 40s, his dark hair showing flecks of gray at the temples. He was thin, too thin, with a nervous energy that showed in the constant movement of his hands, the way he couldn't seem to sit still. I recognized the signs from the addiction awareness training we'd had at work. He was using again, just as Elaine had said. Marcus was laughing at something Cameron said, his face more animated than I'd seen it in months. The sight sent a pang through my chest, a complicated mix of jealousy, fear, and sadness. I'd been trying so hard to connect with him through his turbulent teenage years, and here was this virtual stranger making him light up after just one conversation. I was so focused on them that I didn't notice the waitress had returned until she spoke. "That your boy over there?" she asked, nodding toward Marcus. I hesitated. Was he still my boy? Had he ever truly been? "Yes," I finally said. "That's my son." She looked between us, then at Cameron. Looks more like the other fella." "He would," I said. "That's his biological father." She raised an eyebrow but had enough tact not to pry further. Instead, she refilled my barely touched coffee and moved on to other customers. For nearly an hour, I sat nursing my coffee, watching their interaction from a distance. Marcus was doing most of the talking now, gesturing enthusiastically about something. His robotics team, maybe, or the engineering program he'd been so excited about before last night. Cameron nodded along, but I noticed he kept checking his phone, his leg bouncing restlessly under the table. Then Cameron stood abruptly, saying something to Marcus before heading toward the restrooms at the back of the diner. The moment he was out of sight, Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. He looked around the diner, and that's when he spotted me. His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in anger. He slid out of the booth and marched over. "Are you serious right now?" he hissed, keeping his voice low but making no attempt to hide his fury. "You're spying on me?" "I'm not spying," I said, though I knew how it must look. "I got a call from Cameron's wife. She was concerned." "You had no right to come here," he interrupted. "This is between me and my father." The word father hit like a physical blow. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "Marcus, there are things about Cameron you need to know." "Save it," he snapped. "I know you never wanted me to meet him. Mom told me how you always tried to keep him away. That stopped me cold." "What?" "That's not—" But Marcus was already turning away. "He's taking me to see his house. To meet my half-siblings. Don't follow us." I grabbed his arm, gentle but firm. "Marcus, wait. His wife called me because she's worried. Cameron's struggling with addiction again. He's not stable right now." Marcus yanked his arm away. "More lies? Is that all you know how to do?" "It's not a lie," I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Please, just be careful. Let me give you a ride home after—" "I have my own car," he said coldly, "and I don't need your permission. I'm almost 18. "Being 18 doesn't make you invulnerable," I said. "If Cameron is using again, he shouldn't be driving, and you shouldn't be alone with him." Marcus looked like he was about to argue further when his phone buzzed again. He checked it, frowning. "That's weird," he muttered almost to himself. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated, then showed me the screen. A text from an unknown number. "If you're with Cameron Wells, get away now. He's dangerous when he's using." "That's probably Elaine," I said. "His wife." Marcus looked skeptical. "How would she have my number?" Before I could answer, the bathroom door at the back of the diner banged open. Cameron emerged, wiping his nose with the back of his hand, his movements jerky and his eyes too bright. He spotted us at the counter, and his expression darkened. "What's going on here?" he demanded as he approached, his words slightly slurred. "Who's this guy?" Marcus looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "This is Richard, my stepdad." Cameron's eyes narrowed. "The one who kept you from me all these years?" "That's not what happened," I said, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline surging through me. I could see now that Cameron was high. Pupils dilated. A fine sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the diner's aggressive air conditioning. "The hell it isn't," Cameron spat. "You and Janine, always thinking you were better than me, never gave me a chance to be a father." "You gave up that chance when you signed away your rights," I said evenly, "after you put Janine in the hospital." Marcus's head whipped toward me. "What?" Cameron lunged forward suddenly, grabbing the front of my shirt. "You shut your mouth. You don't know anything about it." Several diners turned to stare. The waitress started moving toward us, concern on her face. "Cameron," I said calmly, not resisting his grip. "You're high right now. Let's not do this here." His grip tightened. "Don't tell me what I am. You took my kid, took my family." "Dad, stop!" Marcus interjected. And for a moment, I thought he was talking to me, but his eyes were fixed on Cameron, wide with shock and growing understanding. "Let him go." The word "dad" seemed to penetrate Cameron's anger. He released my shirt and stepped back, his expression shifting rapidly between rage and confusion. "We're leaving," he declared, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Come on, son." Marcus pulled away. "I'm not going anywhere with you right now. Are you high?" Cameron's face contorted. "Don't you start too. I'm fine. Just needed a little something to calm my nerves for our big meeting." "It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. He glanced at me, then back at Cameron. I think I should go home." "Home?" Cameron laughed bitterly. "With him? He's not your family. I'm your blood." The waitress had reached us now, a burly cook following close behind. "Everything okay here, gentlemen?" she asked, though her tone made it clear that she knew it wasn't. "We're fine," I said. "Just a family disagreement." Cameron snorted. "Family? You're not his family." Marcus stepped between us. "Stop it. Both of you. This was a mistake." He turned to leave, but Cameron grabbed his arm again. "Harder this time. Don't walk away from me. I've waited 17 years for this." "Let go," Marcus said, trying to pull free. When Cameron's grip only tightened, I moved forward instinctively, placing my hand over Cameron's. He said, "Let go." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Cameron released Marcus with a shove that sent him stumbling back against the counter. "Fine, go back to your pretend, Daddy, but this isn't over." He turned and stormed out of the diner, leaving a wake of uncomfortable silence behind him. Through the window, I watched him climb into his blue pickup, rev the engine loudly, and peel out of the parking lot. Marcus stood frozen, his expression a complex mix of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. Finally, he looked at me, his anger replaced by confusion and a vulnerability that reminded me of the little boy he'd once been. "Was he telling the truth?" he asked quietly. "About the hospital?" I nodded slowly. "Let's sit down. It's time you knew everything." We moved to an empty booth in the back, away from curious eyes and ears. The waitress brought fresh coffee without being asked, giving Marcus a sympathetic smile before leaving us alone. "I'm sorry you found out this way," I began. "Your mom and we were going to tell you when you were older. Then after she passed, I couldn't find the right time." "Tell me what happened," Marcus said, his voice steadier now. "All of it." So I did. I told him about how Janine and Cameron had met in college, how their relationship had turned toxic as Cameron's recreational drug use evolved into addiction, how Janine had tried to help him get clean, had stayed through multiple relapses and broken promises, how she'd finally decided to leave when she discovered she was pregnant with Marcus, wanting to create a stable home for her child. The night she told him she was leaving, that's when he got violent, I explained, choosing my words carefully. "She was 6 months pregnant with you." He was high, not thinking clearly. He pushed her down a flight of stairs. Marcus flinched. But in his letters he said, "Mom kept him away because she met you." I shook my head. "I didn't even meet your mom until you were almost 3. She was my neighbor in the apartment complex where she moved after leaving Cameron. I used to see her struggling to carry groceries while holding you, so I started helping out. We became friends first, then more." "What about the termination of parental rights? Did you make him do that?" That was part of a deal with the prosecutor's office. They agreed not to press charges for the assault if he signed away his rights and stayed away from both of you. Your mom agreed because she wanted to move on, to build a safe life for you. Marcus stared into his coffee, processing. But then, why did he start writing those letters when I was 10? Why did Mom keep them if he was so dangerous? "People change," I said. "Or at least, they try to." Cameron got clean, went through rehab, started rebuilding his life. He reached out, wanting to make amends, maybe even establish some kind of relationship with you. Your mom wasn't sure what to do. She wanted to protect you, but she also believed in second chances. So she kept the letters but didn't tell me about them. We decided together to wait until you were older, until you could understand the complexities involved. She wanted you to know where you came from. But she also wanted to be sure Cameron was truly stable before bringing him into your life. And then she died, Marcus said quietly. And then she died, I echoed. And I kept trying to find the right moment, the right way to tell you everything. I should have done better. I'm sorry. Marcus was silent for a long time, turning his coffee cup between his hands. Finally, he looked up. "Those things he said about you keeping him away from me, those weren't true?" "No," I said firmly. "I never tried to replace him or erase him from your life. I just wanted to protect you from pain. Maybe more than I should have." "And the scholarship letter? You really weren't trying to control my future?" I smiled sadly. "Marcus, I've never wanted anything for you except what you want for yourself. I was excited about State because you've been talking about their engineering program since freshman year. If that's changed, then we'll figure out the next steps together." He nodded slowly. "I thought when I found those letters, I thought I'd finally discovered why I never felt like I belonged anywhere. Like maybe if I'd known my real father, everything would make sense. And now?" He glanced toward the window, where Cameron's tire marks were still visible on the parking lot. "Now, I'm not so sure." I reached across the table, not quite touching him, leaving the choice to bridge that gap up to him. Belonging isn't about DNA, Marcus. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you through all the messy parts of growing up. His eyes met mine, and I saw in them a flicker of recognition, not of physical resemblance, but of something deeper. The shared experiences that had shaped us both. The thousands of ordinary moments that, taken together, formed the foundation of our relationship. "I'd like to go home now," he said quietly. "Okay," I agreed. "Your car or mine?" He hesitated. "Together? I can come back from mine tomorrow." I nodded, relief washing through me. Together. As we walked out to the parking lot, Marcus's phone buzzed again. He checked it, then showed me the screen. Another message from the unknown number. "Elaine, presumably. Is Marcus okay? Please let me know he's safe." Marcus typed a quick reply. "I'm fine. Going home with my dad." He hit send before I could fully process the words he'd chosen. Then he looked up at me, a tentative smile forming. "That's okay, right? That I called you that?" The knot that had been sitting in my chest since our argument the night before finally began to loosen. "More than okay," I said, fighting the thickness in my throat. "It's who I've always been." As we drove home in companionable silence, I knew we still had a long road ahead. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight. The questions about Cameron, about biology versus choice, about the meaning of fatherhood, wouldn't disappear with one conversation. But for the first time since Marcus had discovered those letters, I felt hope that we would find our way through this together. Because sometimes, the truth, however painful, is the foundation on which real understanding can finally be built. The drive home from the Blue Plate Diner was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. Marcus stared out the passenger window, watching the familiar landscape roll by, the cornfields just starting to green with early spring growth, the old barn with its fading advertisements painted on the side, the railroad crossing where we'd once waited for 20 minutes while a seemingly endless freight train passed. I wondered what he was thinking, if he was mentally rewriting the narrative of his life to accommodate the new information I'd shared. "I'd like to read those court documents," he said finally as we turned onto our street. "The ones about what happened with my mother." I nodded. "Of course. They're in my office. I gathered everything together last night." He turned to look at me, his expression thoughtful. "Why did you keep all that stuff?" "The police reports, the court papers, everything." It was a fair question. Most people would have discarded such painful reminders long ago. "Your mother wanted you to have the full story someday," I explained, pulling into our driveway. "Not just the sanitized version, not just the parts that made anyone look good or bad. She believed you deserved the complete truth when you were ready for it." Our house looked exactly as we'd left it. The basketball hoop above the garage, the wind chimes Janine had hung on the front porch years ago, the garden bench where we'd sit on summer evenings. But something had shifted between yesterday and today, an invisible reorientation that made the familiar suddenly new. Inside, I went straight to my office and retrieved the folder I'd organized the night before. I handed it to Marcus without preamble. "Take your time," I said. "I'll be in the kitchen if you have questions." While Marcus read, I channeled my nervous energy into cooking, something I'd gotten better at out of necessity after Janine died. I started prepping for Marcus's favorite pasta dish, methodically chopping onions and garlic, the rhythmic motion of the knife against the cutting board soothing my frayed nerves. Nearly an hour passed before I heard his footsteps approaching the kitchen. I looked up to find him standing in the doorway, the folder clutched in one hand, his expression unreadable. "She was in the hospital for 3 days," he said, his voice steady but strained, "because of what he did to her. To both of you." His hand moved unconsciously to his stomach, as if protecting the unborn version of himself described in those clinical reports. "Yes," I confirmed. "She had some internal bleeding, and they were worried about premature labor. They managed to stop it, but she was on strict bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy." Marcus set the folder on the counter and sank into one of the kitchen chairs. All this time, I thought he was some kind of, misunderstood hero or something. The way Mom talked about him. "Your mother didn't believe in speaking ill of anyone, especially not to you about your biological father," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "She wanted you to form your own opinions when you were old enough to understand the complexities involved." "But she married you," Marcus pointed out. "She chose you to be my father." I leaned against the counter, considering his words. "She chose me to be her partner, yes. And together we chose to be a family, but she never wanted to erase Cameron from your life completely. That's why she gave you his last name, Wells, instead of hers or mine. She wanted you to have that connection to your origins, even if the relationship itself couldn't be what she had hoped for." "The letters," Marcus said abruptly. "They started when I was 10. Why then, after so many years of nothing?" I hesitated, unsure how much more truth he was ready to hear, but holding back had already cost us dearly. "That's when the restraining order expired," I explained. "It had been renewed several times, but your mother finally decided not to pursue it further. Cameron had been clean for a few years by then, according to mutual friends. He'd remarried, had 2 more children." "Half-siblings I've never met," Marcus murmured. "Yes. Your mother thought perhaps it was time to at least consider the possibility of some kind of relationship. She kept the letters while she decided what to do, how to approach the situation. And then she got sick." The blunt reminder of Janine's cancer hung in the air between us. "Yes," I said softly. "And everything else seemed less important." Marcus nodded, his eyes distant. "I remember those last months. How she'd sometimes start to tell me something important, then change her mind, and say it could wait. She thought she had more time," I said, the familiar grief rising in my chest. We all did. Marcus looked up suddenly. That woman who called you Elaine, how did she know to reach out? I called her. I admitted. After you left last night, I found Cameron's contact information among your mother's papers. I called this morning, hoping to speak with him directly. Elaine answered instead. So she warned you because she's lived through his relapses before, I said gently. She knows the pattern. The promising recovery, the slow decline, the denial that anything's wrong until it's too late. She was trying to protect you from disappointment. From worse. Marcus seemed to consider this. She texted me too. How did she get my number? I gave it to her, I said. When I realized you were determined to meet him today, no matter what I said, I wanted there to be someone else looking out for you. Someone Cameron might actually listen to. To my surprise, a small smile flickered across Marcus's face. You put aside your pride and asked for help from a complete stranger just to keep me safe, even though I was being a total jerk to you. I shrugged. That's what parents do. The simple statement hung between us, a bridge across the chasm that had opened the night before. I should apologize, Marcus began, but I shook my head. You reacted to incomplete information exactly as anyone would. I said, I'm the one who should have found a better way to tell you the whole story years ago. Mom wouldn't have waited so long, Marcus said, a hint of accusation returning to his voice. No, she wouldn't have. I agreed. She was better at the hard conversations than I am. After she died, I kept thinking I needed to find the perfect moment, the perfect words. But life doesn't work that way. So what happens now? Marcus asked, the question encompassing far more than just our immediate future. That depends, I said. What do you want to happen? He looked down at his hands, thinking. I still want to know him. Cameron, I mean. But not like this. Not while he's using again. That's fair, I said. And honestly, that's what your mother would have wanted too. She believed in second chances, but she was also fiercely protective of you. Like you were today. Marcus acknowledged quietly, following me to that diner. I smiled ruefully. Not my most subtle parenting moment. No, but maybe your most honest one. He hesitated. Did you ever think about leaving? After Mom died, I mean. It would have been easier than raising a teenager who isn't even biologically yours. The question caught me off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. No, I said simply. Not once. Not for a moment. Why? The word was so quiet I almost missed it. Because you're my son, I said. Biology has nothing to do with it. I was there when you lost your first tooth. I taught you to ride a bike. I held you when you cried at your mother's funeral. Those moments matter more than DNA ever could. Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. I've been so angry lately. At Mom for dying. At you for, I don't know, for not being her. And then, when I found those letters, I had somewhere to direct all that anger. I understand, I said. Grief does strange things to us. And adolescence isn't exactly known for emotional stability, even under the best circumstances. A small laugh escaped him. Yeah, I guess not. His expression turned serious again. But that doesn't excuse how I've been treating you. Or what I said last night. We all say things we don't mean when we're hurt and confused, I offered. He shook his head. No, that's too easy. I need to own this. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. The sound of that word, Dad, after so many months of cold silence, or the formal Richard, hit me with unexpected force. I had to look away for a moment to compose myself. Thank you, I managed finally. That means a lot. We sat in silence for a while, the air between us lighter than it had been in months. Finally, I gestured to the half-prepared meal on the counter. I was making your favorite. Still hungry? He nodded. Starving, actually. Need help? Together, we finished preparing dinner, falling into the comfortable rhythm we'd established years ago. Marcus chopping vegetables while I handled the stovetop, working in tandem without needing many words. As we sat down to eat, I noticed him looking at his phone, which had buzzed with a new message. Everything okay? I asked cautiously, not wanting to pry but concerned about who might be reaching out. It's Elaine again, he said, showing me the screen. She's asking if I got home safe and if I'd consider talking with her sometime. Says she has some photos of my half-siblings she could share if I'm interested. What do you think? I asked, leaving the decision entirely to him. He considered for a moment. I think I'd like that. Maybe not right away, but soon. He set the phone down. Would that be weird for you? If I got to know that side of my family? I shook my head. Not at all. Your mother would have wanted that for you. A connection to your roots, as long as it's healthy and positive. What about Cameron? The question was tentative, testing the boundaries of our newly restored trust. I took my time answering, wanting to be completely honest. That's more complicated. I believe people can change, can overcome addiction. Your mother certainly did. But it takes real commitment, not just promises. I met his eyes directly. If he gets clean again, truly clean, and proves he can stay that way, I wouldn't stand in the way of you having some kind of relationship with him. But you wouldn't encourage it either, Marcus observed, reading between the lines. I'd be cautious, I admitted, because I've seen what his choices have cost you and your mother over the years. But ultimately, once you're an adult, that relationship is yours to define, not mine. Marcus nodded slowly. Thanks for being honest. I think I need some time before I decide anything. Time is something we have plenty of, I assured him. No rush. After dinner, as Marcus headed upstairs to his room, he paused on the landing. That scholarship to state, he said, turning back to me. Is it still an option? Even after I crumpled up the letter? I smiled. I called the admissions office this morning. They're holding your spot. I told them you needed a few extra days to make your decision. Relief washed over his face. Good. Because I think I do want it. The engineering program is exactly what I've been working toward. Then it's yours, I said simply. All you have to do is say yes. He nodded, a genuine smile breaking through the emotional exhaustion of the day. I will. Tomorrow. Tomorrow works, I agreed. Get some rest. As he continued up the stairs, I realized this was the first normal conversation we'd had in months. The first time he'd shared his thoughts openly instead of in reluctant monosyllables or angry outbursts. It was a small step, but a significant one. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found myself drawn to the family photos that lined the hallway, chronicling Marcus's growth from a toddler to the young man he'd become. In one particular photo taken when he was about 5, he sat on my shoulders at a county fair, his small hands gripping my forehead, his face alight with joy as we both laughed at something beyond the camera's view. I remembered that day clearly, how he'd wanted to see the parade over the crowd, how naturally he'd reached for me to lift him up. There was no question then about who we were to each other, no doubt or hesitation in his trust that I would hold him securely, keep him safe. Somehow we needed to find our way back to that essential truth, that family is built on far more than biology. It's built in moments of presence, in showing up day after day, in the quiet consistency of love expressed through both grand gestures and ordinary routines. A soft sound behind me made me turn. Marcus stood in the doorway of his room, watching me study the photographs. I remember that day, he said, nodding toward the fair photo. You won me that ridiculous oversized teddy bear that barely fit in the car. I smiled at the memory. You named it Mr. Huggins and insisted it needed its own seatbelt. Mom thought it was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen, Marcus recalled, a hint of wistfulness in his voice. But she let you keep it anyway, I added. It lived on your bed until I decided I was too old for stuffed animals in 6th grade. He finished. He hesitated. I didn't actually get rid of it, you know. It's in my closet, behind my winter clothes. The simple confession, this small vulnerability shared, felt like a peace offering, a return to the openness we'd once taken for granted. Your secret's safe with me, I assured him. He lingered in the doorway, clearly wanting to say something more but struggling to find the words. "I've been thinking about what happened today," he finally managed. "About Cameron and how different things could have been if he'd been the one raising me instead of you." I waited, letting him work through his thoughts at his own pace. "I used to fantasize about him sometimes," Marcus continued. "This mysterious biological father who might show up one day and somehow make everything in my life make sense. But today, seeing him in person..." He shook his head. "Reality didn't match the fantasy." "Reality rarely does," I offered gently. "The thing is," Marcus said, his voice growing steadier, "I realized something important today. When I was scared, when I didn't know what to do, it wasn't Cameron I wanted there with me. It was you." The simple truth of his statement hit me with unexpected force. All these years, I'd been worrying about competing with a ghost, with the idea of a real father that Marcus might one day prefer to me. I'd never considered that when it truly mattered, our shared history would speak louder than any biological connection. "I'll always be there when you need me," I promised, "no matter what." He nodded, accepting this as the absolute truth it was. "I know," he said. Then, with a small smile, "That's what dads do, right? The good ones, at least." I agreed, returning his smile. He turned to go back to his room, then paused once more. "Dad? Thanks for not giving up on me, even when I was giving up on you." "Never," I said simply. "Not possible." After he'd gone back to bed, I remained in the hallway for a long moment, looking at those photographs that chronicled our life together. The camping trip when Marcus was 8. His middle school graduation. The robotics competition he'd won last year. A timeline of moments big and small that had shaped us both. Fatherhood, I reflected, isn't something you're born into. It's something you become, choice by choice, day by day. It's showing up even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. It's loving someone enough to put their needs above your own, to fight for their future, even when they're pushing you away. Cameron Wells had created Marcus biologically, had contributed the genetic blueprint from which my son had been formed. But biology alone doesn't make a father. Presence does. Consistency does. Love expressed in both words and actions does. I'd been there for Marcus's nightmares and triumphs, his scraped knees and broken hearts. I'd helped with science projects and algebra homework, taught him to shave and to drive. I'd held him while he cried at his mother's funeral and respected his need for space in the difficult years that followed. That shared history, the cumulative weight of thousands of ordinary moments, was the foundation of our relationship, a foundation far stronger than DNA could ever be. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing, a small but significant change from the past months, when Marcus would either sleep until noon or slip out of the house before I was awake. I found him in the kitchen, awkwardly attempting to make pancakes, the counter dusted with flour and several misshapen attempts already piled on a plate. "They're supposed to be round," he said ruefully as I entered. "These look more like amoebas." "Amoebas are underrated," I replied, accepting the mug of coffee he handed me. "What's the occasion?" He shrugged, trying for casual but not quite achieving it. "Just felt like making breakfast. For both of us." The simple gesture, this attempt to rebuild our routine, to create a moment of normalcy after the chaos of the past 2 days, touched me deeply. "Need some help?" I offered. He nodded, looking relieved. "Yeah, that would be good." Standing side by side at the stove, we found our rhythm again. Marcus pouring the batter while I monitored the heat, flipping each pancake at just the right moment. It was an ordinary Sunday morning task, nothing special to an outside observer. But to us, it represented something profound. A return to the comfortable partnership we'd built over years, a silent acknowledgement that we were finding our way back to each other. As we sat down to eat, Marcus pulled out his phone and set it on the table between us. "I think I'm going to text Elaine back today," he said. "Just to thank her for the warning yesterday and maybe ask about those photos of my half-siblings." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the twinge of apprehension I felt. "That sounds reasonable." He must have caught something in my tone because he looked up quickly. "I'm not rushing into anything," he assured me. I think I'd like to know them someday, when the time is right. Of course, I said, meaning it. They're part of your story, too. And Cameron? He asked, testing the waters. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. That's more complicated, as we discussed. But I trust your judgment, Marcus. I know you'll make thoughtful decisions about that relationship when the time comes. He seemed to consider this, then nodded slowly. I think right now I need some distance from him. Until he gets help, at least. Yesterday was... He trailed off, struggling to articulate the complexity of his feelings. A lot, I supplied. It was a lot to process all at once. Yeah, he agreed, but I'm glad I know the truth now, all of it. Even the hard parts. We finished breakfast in comfortable silence, the tension of the past months noticeably absent. After we'd cleared the dishes, Marcus hesitated by the counter, clearly working up to something. I was thinking, he began, about the college scholarship. I want to accept it, but I'm not sure engineering is exactly what I want anymore. This was unexpected. Oh? Yeah, I've been thinking about maybe switching to their biomedical program, with a focus on addiction medicine. His eyes met mine, steady and serious. After everything that happened with Cameron and learning about what Mom went through, I think maybe I could help people like that, make a difference. The sincerity in his voice struck me. This wasn't a passing idea, but something he'd been considering deeply. I think that sounds like an excellent path, I said, meaning every word. Your mother would be incredibly proud of that choice. You think so? I know so, I assured him. She always said you had a healer's heart. He smiled, a flash of genuine happiness lighting his face. I'd forgotten she used to say that. She knew you better than anyone, I said, and she was usually right. Marcus nodded, then took a deep breath. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about, he said, his expression turning serious again. My name. Your name? I echoed, unsure what he meant. Wells, he clarified. I've been thinking. Maybe it's time for a change, now that I know the whole story. I felt my breath catch. What kind of change? I want to take your name, he said simply. Harlow. Or maybe hyphenate it. Wells Harlow. To honor both sides of who I am. For a moment, I couldn't speak, overcome by the unexpected gesture. Marcus, I finally managed. I'm honored, truly, but it's a big decision. You should take some time to think about it. I have been thinking about it, he insisted, ever since yesterday. It just feels right. Well, I said, working to keep my voice steady, we can certainly look into the process, but whatever name you choose, you should know it doesn't change anything about how I see you. I know, he said. It's more about how I see myself, about acknowledging the truth of who my real father is. The words hung in the air between us, a declaration that went beyond legal documents or genetic connections, a recognition of the deeper truth about what makes a family. Later that day, as Marcus worked on his acceptance email to State University, explaining his interest in their biomedical program, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The painful revelations, the hard conversations, the slow rebuilding of trust, all of it necessary steps toward a more authentic relationship. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. Marcus would have more questions about Cameron as he processed everything he'd learned. He might still want to establish some kind of relationship with his biological father in the future, if Cameron could find his way to genuine recovery. There would be decisions about name changes and connections with half-siblings, and all the complicated navigation that comes with blended families and multiple narratives. But for now, watching my son hunched over his laptop, his face set in concentration as he mapped out his future, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the crisis averted, but for the deeper understanding we'd found through weathering this storm together. Fatherhood, I reflected, isn't about perfection. It's about presence, about showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. It's about loving someone enough to tell them difficult truths, and then standing beside them as they process those truths. It's about being a safe harbor in life's storms, a steady hand when the path grows uncertain. Biology can create a child, But only love, commitment, and daily choices can create a father. And in the end, it's those choices, made and remade each day, that truly define a family. 6 months had passed since the day at the Blue Plate Diner. Summer had given way to fall, and Marcus's first semester at State University was well underway. The changes in our relationship hadn't happened overnight. Trust, once fractured, takes time to rebuild. But slowly, steadily, we'd found our way back to solid ground. I stood in the parking lot outside Marcus's dormitory, leaning against my car as students streamed past, backpacks slung over shoulders, conversations floating around me like leaves caught in an autumn breeze. It was family weekend, my first visit since move-in day in August, and I couldn't help but notice how at home Marcus already seemed in this new environment. "Dad!" His voice cut through the campus noise, and I turned to see him jogging toward me, his face bright with a smile that reached his eyes, a far cry from the angry young man who had confronted me in our kitchen half a year ago. We embraced briefly, that slightly awkward but sincere hug that fathers and sons master over time. Neither too tight nor too casual, a physical acknowledgement of the bond between us. "How was the drive?" he asked, taking my overnight bag before I could protest. "Not bad." Traffic was light for a Friday. I fell into step beside him, noting the subtle changes in his appearance. His hair was a bit longer, and he carried himself with a new confidence that hadn't been there before. "How are classes?" "Challenging," he admitted as we navigated the busy sidewalk, especially organic chemistry. "But I'm managing. Got a study group that meets 3 times a week. And the biomedical program. Still feeling good about that choice." He nodded emphatically. "Even better than I expected. My addiction science professor is incredible. She worked in recovery services for 15 years before coming to academia. Makes everything real, you know." "Sounds perfect for you," I said, genuinely pleased that his last-minute program change was working out. As we walked, Marcus pointed out campus landmarks, the library where he studied late on Tuesdays, the coffee shop with the best espresso, the lawn where students gathered for impromptu frisbee games on warm afternoons. It was a normal campus tour from a son to his visiting father, but the easy way he shared these details of his new life felt like a gift after the months of strained silence we'd endured. "Oh," he said suddenly, checking his phone, "I forgot to mention, Elaine's meeting us for lunch tomorrow. Is that okay?" The casual way he dropped this information belied its significance. Over the summer, Marcus had been in regular contact with Cameron's wife, exchanging texts and occasional video calls. Through her, he'd begun to develop a relationship with his half-siblings, Noah, 8, and Sophia, 6, sharing virtual game nights and sending birthday gifts. It was a connection I'd encouraged, seeing how it helped Marcus understand more about his biological roots without the complications of direct contact with Cameron himself. "Of course," I said, "it'll be good to meet her in person finally." Marcus shot me a grateful look. "Thanks for being cool about all this. I know it's not conventional." I laughed. "Nothing about our family has ever been conventional. We just make it work." "Speaking of family," he said, his tone shifting slightly, "there's something I need to tell you. I got a call from Cameron last week." I kept my expression neutral, though my chest tightened involuntarily. "Oh?" "Yeah, he's in rehab again. Voluntarily this time. 90-day inpatient program." Marcus glanced at me, gauging my reaction. He asked if I'd be willing to have a call with him and his counselor as part of his recovery process. We'd reached the entrance to his dorm building, but instead of going inside, Marcus stopped, turning to face me directly. "I haven't given him an answer yet. I wanted to talk to you first." The fact that he'd waited to discuss this with me in person rather than mentioning it in our regular phone calls spoke volumes about its importance to him and his consideration for how it might affect me. "What are you thinking?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective rather than immediately offering my own. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his mother's it made my heart ache momentarily. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to help if I can. Another part remembers how he was at the diner and wonders if anything's really changed." "Those are both valid reactions," I said carefully. "Recovery is complicated. Relapse is often part of the process." "That's what my addiction science professor says too." He hesitated. "I guess I'm worried about getting my hopes up again, about letting him back into my life only to have him disappear when things get tough." That's a real risk, I acknowledged, and only you can decide if it's one worth taking. We stood in silence for a moment, students streaming around us like a river parting around stones. What would you do? He finally asked. If you were me, I considered the question seriously, wanting to give him the honest guidance he deserved. I'd probably start small, I said finally. Maybe agree to one call, with very clear boundaries. See how that feels before committing to anything more. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. But Marcus, I added, whatever you decide, you should know it doesn't affect anything between you and me. Our relationship isn't contingent on what happens with Cameron. The relief in his eyes told me this reassurance was exactly what he needed to hear. Thanks, Dad. Inside his dorm room, surprisingly tidy for a college freshman, Marcus had pinned photos to a corkboard above his desk. I noticed several of him and me from various stages of his childhood, alongside a new one I hadn't seen before. A picture of Janine holding him as a baby, her smile radiant as she gazed down at her newborn son. Where did you find that? I asked, touching the edge of the photo gently. I don't remember seeing it before. It was in that box in the attic, Marcus explained. In an envelope under Mom's journals. I hope it's okay that I took it. Of course, I said, studying the image. She was so happy that day. I remember her calling me. We were just neighbors then. Practically bursting with joy about finally bringing you home from the hospital. Marcus smiled softly. I've been reading her journals, he admitted. The ones from before you two got together. She wrote about you, you know. About how you used to help her carry groceries and fix things around her apartment. I felt a flush of warmth at the thought of Janine writing about those early days. She didn't tell me she kept journals. There's a whole stack of them. I brought a few with me to school. He gestured to his bookshelf, where several leather-bound notebooks sat between textbooks. They helped me feel connected to her. And they've helped me understand a lot about everything. I nodded, touched by this glimpse into how he was processing his complicated family history. Your mother was an exceptional woman. She had more courage and compassion than anyone I've ever known. She wrote about that too, Marcus said. About learning to forgive Cameron, even after everything he did. Not for his sake, but for her own peace. He paused. I think maybe that's part of why I'm considering taking his call. Not because I owe him anything, but because holding on to anger isn't helping me. The maturity in his reflection struck me. This wasn't the impulsive teenager who had stormed out of our house 6 months ago, but a young man thoughtfully navigating complex emotional terrain. That sounds like something your mother would say, I observed. She was wise that way. Marcus nodded. Then his expression brightened as he remembered something. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. I got the internship at Memorial Hospital's Addiction Research Center for next summer. The one I applied for last month. Marcus, that's fantastic, I exclaimed, genuinely thrilled. That's an incredibly competitive program. He grinned, a flash of well-earned pride breaking through his usually modest demeanor. Dr. Patel said my personal statement was what stood out. She said most applicants write about wanting to help people in an abstract way. But I wrote about understanding addiction from both sides, as something that hurt my family, but also as a disease that needs compassion instead of judgment. That perspective will make you an excellent researcher, I said. And clinician, if that's the path you choose. I think it might be, he admitted. I'm starting to see how all these pieces of my life, even the painful ones, might be leading somewhere meaningful. Later that evening, after dinner at a local restaurant Marcus had been eager to show me, we sat on a bench overlooking the campus quad, watching students crisscross the paths as twilight settled over the university. The conversation flowed easily between us, covering everything from his classes to my work to the latest updates from his friends back home. During a comfortable lull, Marcus turned to me, his expression thoughtful. There's something else I've been meaning to talk to you about. The name change. The legal process to change his surname from Wells to Harlow had been initiated over the summer, but had stalled due to some bureaucratic complications. I got a letter from the court clerk last week, he continued. They need more documentation because I'm over 17 but under 18. Mom's death certificate, and something that proves you're my legal guardian. I've got copies of everything at home, I assured him. I can send it all next week. He nodded, looking relieved. Good. I'd like to get it done before I turn 18. Make it official while it's still, a family decision rather than just my own. The subtle distinction touched me deeply. This wasn't just about changing a name on paper, but about acknowledging the relationship that had defined his life, about choosing to be identified with me in a formal, legal sense. Have you told Elaine about the name change? I asked, curious about how Cameron's wife had reacted. Yeah, she knows. She actually said she understands. He hesitated. She told me Cameron knows too. She thought he should hear it from her, rather than being surprised by it later. And his reaction? Marcus shrugged. She didn't go into details, just said he took it about as well as expected. He looked at me directly. But honestly, his feelings about it aren't my priority. This is about who I am and who I want to be, not about making him comfortable. I nodded, respecting his clarity about his own boundaries. You know, when your mother and I first discussed adopting you legally, this was before we got married. She was adamant about not changing your last name. She felt it was an important connection to your origins. She wrote about that too, Marcus said. About wanting me to have a sense of where I came from, even if Cameron wasn't actively in my life. She was right, at that time. I acknowledged. You needed that connection, that understanding of your complete story. But now I know the whole story, Marcus said quietly. And I get to decide what parts of it define me going forward. The simple truth of his statement resonated deeply. Isn't that what growing up is ultimately about? Learning your full story, the beautiful parts and the painful ones, and then choosing which elements become the foundation for your future self. The next morning, we met Elaine Wells at a coffee shop near campus. I wasn't sure what I'd expected. Perhaps someone hardened by years of dealing with an addicted spouse, but the woman who greeted us with a warm smile and nervous eyes surprised me. She was petite with curly brown hair streaked with premature gray, dressed simply in jeans and a cardigan, a teacher's ID badge still clipped to her purse. It's so good to finally meet you in person, she said, shaking my hand firmly. Marcus talks about you constantly. Does he now? I glanced at my son, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. All good things, she assured me as we settled at a table by the window. I feel like I know you already. There was an initial awkwardness, unavoidable given the circumstances of our connection, but it dissipated quickly as Elaine proved to be remarkably easy to talk with. She taught 4th grade at the local elementary school, coached girls, soccer, and spoke about Noah and Sophia with the animated pride all parents share when discussing their children. They're so excited about having a big brother, she told Marcus. Sophia's been telling everyone at school about you. The genuine affection in her voice as she spoke about Marcus's relationship with her children touched me deeply. This woman owed us nothing, yet she had gone out of her way to foster a connection that many in her position might have found threatening or unnecessary. As Marcus excused himself to order another round of coffee, I found myself alone with Elaine for the first time. Thank you, I said simply, for reaching out that day at the diner. For everything you've done since. She shook her head. I should be thanking you. For raising such an amazing young man. For being willing to share him with us, even after. She trailed off, then met my eyes directly. Cameron's mistakes don't define all of us. I wanted Marcus to know that. That's exactly what his mother would have wanted too, I said. For him to understand all sides of his story. A shadow crossed Elaine's face. I'm sorry I never got to meet her. From everything Marcus has told me, she sounds like she was an incredible person. She was, I confirmed. She believed in second chances, in healing, in finding the light even in dark situations. Elaine nodded. That's what I'm trying to teach my children too. She hesitated. And what I hope Cameron can still learn. How is he doing? I asked carefully. In the program? Better this time, she said, a cautious optimism in her voice. It's his third attempt at inpatient rehab, but the first time he went voluntarily, without court orders or ultimatums. She twisted her wedding ring thoughtfully. The counselor says that makes a significant difference in outcomes. I hope it works out, I said, and meant it. Not just for Marcus's sake, but for Noah and Sophia's as well. For Elaine's. Me too, she said softly. Then with a directness that reminded me of Janine. Has Marcus mentioned that Cameron asked to speak with him? I nodded. Last night. He's still considering it. I told him he should take all the time he needs, she said. No pressure from any of us. This has to be his decision. We're aligned on that, I assured her. Marcus returned with our coffees, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. His classes, the upcoming family weekend events, Sophia's recent ballet recital. Watching him interact with Elaine, I was struck by how naturally they related to each other, finding common ground in shared interests and values, despite the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. As we were preparing to leave, Elaine pulled a small photo album from her bag. I brought these for you, she told Marcus. Just some pictures of Noah and Sophia, and a few of Cameron from when he was your age, if you're interested. His mother sent them to me years ago. Marcus accepted the album with visible emotion. Thank you. This means a lot. They're copies, she assured him. You can keep them. Outside the coffee shop as we said our goodbyes, Elaine surprised me with a quick, warm hug. Take care of each other, she said, including both Marcus and me in her gaze. We always do, I replied. Walking back toward campus for the afternoon's family weekend activities, Marcus was quiet, the photo album tucked securely under his arm. She's nice, I offered, breaking the silence. I can see why you've connected with her. He nodded. Yeah. She makes everything less complicated somehow. He glanced at me. Thanks for being so cool about all this. I know it can't be easy for you. Why do you say that? He shrugged. Because it means sharing, I guess. Letting someone else have a piece of our family story. I considered this. I don't see it that way, I said finally. I think our story is expanding, not being divided. The more people who care about you, the better. He smiled, the tension in his shoulders visibly easing. I like that perspective. Besides, I added, family isn't a limited resource. It grows as needed. Later that afternoon, as we watched the university orchestra perform in the campus amphitheater, I noticed Marcus occasionally glancing at the photo album, which he'd brought along in his backpack. During a musical interlude, he leaned toward me. I found a picture of Cameron from when he was around my age, he whispered. It's weird, like looking at a version of myself that took a completely different path. I nodded, understanding the strange dissonance he must be feeling. Genetics are powerful, I acknowledged, but they're just the beginning of who we become. I think I'm going to take that call, he said after a moment. The one with Cameron and his counselor. You've thought it through? Yeah. I'm not expecting miracles, just a conversation. A starting point. He met my eyes. Is that okay with you? Marcus, this isn't about what's okay with me, I said gently. This is about what you need. I know, but... He hesitated. I don't want you to think I'm choosing him over you. The fear in his voice, that I might misinterpret his desire to connect with his biological father as a rejection of me, broke my heart a little. Hey, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. That's not even remotely what I'm thinking. This isn't an either-or situation. Some people would see it that way, he pointed out. Some people have a very limited understanding of what makes a family. I countered. You're fortunate enough to have the space to explore all aspects of your story. That's a gift, not a betrayal. The relief in his eyes was immediate and profound. Thanks, Dad. As the orchestra began the next piece, I reflected on how far we'd come in 6 months. From the bitter accusations in our kitchen to this moment of genuine understanding and mutual respect. The journey hadn't been easy, but the relationship we'd rebuilt was stronger than before, tested by fire and found resilient. That evening, our last before I'd head home the following day, we sat in Marcus's dorm room looking through old family photos I'd brought along. Camping trips and birthdays, school plays and sports games, the ordinary moments that, strung together, create the narrative of a life shared. "I remember this one," Marcus said, holding up a picture of himself at about 10, standing proudly beside a science fair project. "Mom stayed up all night helping me finish it after I procrastinated for weeks. She was determined you'd learn the value of planning ahead," I recalled with a laugh. "Though I'm not sure the lesson stuck." He grinned sheepishly. "Still working on that one." We continued through the photos, each image triggering memories and stories, creating a tapestry of shared experiences that defined our years together as a family. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully as we reached the end of the album, "I used to think finding my biological father would answer all my questions about who I am. Like there was this missing piece that would suddenly make everything make sense." I waited, letting him find his way to the insight I sensed was coming. "But the truth is," he continued, "I already knew who I was. I just needed to accept that it's complicated, that I'm shaped by biology and choice, by presence and absence, by all these different influences." He looked at me directly, and that the most important parts of me came from the people who chose to be there, day after day, year after year. The wisdom in his words, earned through struggle, through confronting difficult truths and making peace with them, filled me with profound pride. "You know," I said, "when your mother and I first talked about making our relationship official, about me adopting you legally, I had all these worries. Whether I could be a good enough father, whether you'd resent me someday for not being biologically related to you, whether I had any right to step into that role. What did Mom say about all that?" Marcus asked. I smiled at the memory. "She told me that biology is just the beginning of the story, that what matters most is who shows up, who stays, who loves unconditionally through all the messy, complicated parts of life." "She was right," Marcus said simply. "She usually was," I agreed. "And she'd be incredibly proud of the man you're becoming, Marcus. Of how you're finding your way through all this complexity with such grace." Later, after saying goodnight and returning to my hotel room, I found myself thinking about the journey of the past 6 months. From crisis to healing, from misunderstanding to deeper truth. The road hadn't been straight or simple, but each twist and turn had ultimately led us to a better place. A more authentic relationship built on honesty rather than convenient fictions. Family, I reflected, is perhaps the most complex human institution we create, a delicate web of biology and choice, of shared history and individual paths, of love that must constantly evolve to accommodate growth and change. The strongest families aren't those with the simplest stories or the most conventional structures, but those with the courage to face hard truths together, to grow through difficulty rather than being diminished by it. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself profoundly grateful, not just for the restoration of my relationship with Marcus, but for the deeper understanding we'd both gained through this challenging journey. The recognition that family isn't defined by DNA or legal documents, by perfect outcomes or uncomplicated feelings, but by the daily choice to show up, to love, to remain present even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult, because that's when it matters most. The envelope arrived on a crisp October morning, nearly a year to the day since that fateful argument in our kitchen. The return address bore the official seal of the county court, and I knew without opening it what it contained. Marcus's official name change documents. Richard Marcus Harlow. Legal validation of the bond we'd forged through 17 years of ordinary moments and extraordinary challenges. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table, right where the scholarship letter had lain crumpled that night. So much had changed since then, not just in our relationship, but in Marcus himself. His first year of college had transformed him from an angry teenager seeking identity into a young man steadily finding his path. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. "Dad? Did it come?" Marcus's eager voice asked the moment I answered. "Just arrived," I confirmed, smiling at his enthusiasm. "How did you know?" "The court clerk emailed me this morning, said it was sent out yesterday." There was a pause. "Can you open it?" "I want to make sure everything's correct." I cradled the phone between ear and shoulder as I carefully slit the envelope and unfolded the official document. Richard Marcus Harlow. I read aloud, my voice catching slightly on our now shared surname. Looks perfect. It feels right, he said simply. Like something finally clicked into place. We chatted about his classes, his upcoming midterms, the research project he'd recently begun with his addiction science professor. The easy conversation between us still felt like a gift, especially in contrast to the strained silences of the previous year. "Oh, before I forget," Marcus said, his tone shifting slightly. "I had that call with Cameron and his counselor yesterday." My hand tightened involuntarily around the phone. Despite my best efforts to be supportive of Marcus's choice to establish contact with his biological father, I couldn't help the instinctive concern that arose. "How did it go?" "Better than I expected, actually," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "Different from what I imagined." "Different how?" He was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts. "I guess I expected, I don't know, some big emotional scene? Tears and apologies and dramatic promises. But it wasn't like that at all." "What was it like?" I prompted gently. "Very structured. The counselor facilitated the whole thing, kept it focused on specific topics. Cameron mostly listened while I talked about how his absence and then his sudden reappearance affected me. There was a note of surprise in Marcus's voice. He didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify anything, just acknowledged the pain he'd caused. "That sounds like a positive step," I offered cautiously. "Yeah, it was." Marcus paused again. "You know what he said that actually meant something to me? He said, I wasn't ready to be your father, and Richard was. I'm grateful he was there when I couldn't be." The unexpected acknowledgement caught me off guard. After all our concerns about Cameron trying to undermine our relationship or compete for Marcus's loyalty, this simple recognition of reality was refreshingly honest. "That's surprisingly self-aware," I managed. Marcus laughed softly. "That's what his counselor said too. Apparently, it's a big step in recovery, seeing things as they really are, not how you wish they were, or how your addiction tells you they should be." "Are you planning to talk with him again?" I asked, careful to keep any judgment from my tone. "Maybe." The counselor suggested we take it slow, one conversation at a time. His voice grew more confident. "But I'm not looking for another dad, you know? That position's filled. I'm just trying to understand this part of my story better." The simple declaration warmed me more than he could know. "I support whatever helps you do that," I said sincerely. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long while, the name change document before me, reflecting on the unexpected journey of the past year. When Marcus had first discovered those letters from Cameron, I'd feared losing him, not just to his biological father, but to the anger and resentment that threatened to consume our relationship. Instead, the painful truth had ultimately freed us both to build something stronger, more authentic than before. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened the front door to find a delivery person with a large, flat package. "Delivery for Richard Harlow," he announced, consulting his clipboard. I signed for the package, puzzled as I hadn't ordered anything recently. Inside was a framed document. Marcus's acceptance letter to State University, professionally matted and framed, the scholarship offer prominently displayed. A note was attached in Marcus's handwriting. "To replace the one I crumpled. Some achievements deserve to be remembered. Love, Marcus." The thoughtful gesture touched me deeply, not just the gift itself, but the acknowledgement of how far we'd come since that night. I hung it in my office immediately, a tangible reminder of both struggle and triumph. Later that evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone pinged with a text message from an unfamiliar number. "This is Cameron Wells. Marcus gave me your number. Would you have time for a call sometime? There are things I'd like to say directly to you." I stared at the message, conflicting emotions rising within me. Part of me wanted nothing to do with the man who had caused Janine and Marcus so much pain. Another part recognized the courage it must have taken for him to reach out, especially knowing my likely skepticism. After careful consideration, I typed my reply. "I can talk tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. The response came almost immediately. "Thank you. I appreciate it more than you know." The following evening, at precisely 7 p.m., my phone rang. I took a deep breath before answering, steeling myself for whatever might come. "Richard Harlow speaking." "Mr. Harlow, This is Cameron Wells." His voice was deeper than I'd expected, steady but with an underlying nervousness. "Thank you for taking my call. Marcus mentioned you might be in touch," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "What can I do for you?" There was a brief pause. "I wanted to thank you," he said finally, "for being the father Marcus needed when I couldn't or wouldn't be there." The directness of his statement caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, or perhaps a veiled attempt to justify his past actions. "I didn't do it for you," I said plainly. "I did it because I love him." "I know," Cameron acknowledged. "That's precisely why I'm grateful. You loved him for who he is, not what he represented or what he could do for you." Another pause. "I'd like to think I would have done the same in your position, but honestly, I don't know if I would have had that kind of strength." His candor was disarming. This wasn't the manipulative addict Marcus had encountered at the diner a year ago, but someone fighting for clarity and accountability. "My counselor says I need to make amends," Cameron continued. "But she's also been very clear that real amends isn't just saying sorry, it's changing behavior going forward. And part of that, for me, is recognizing and respecting the relationship you and Marcus have built." "I appreciate that," I said, meaning it. Marcus values the connection he's developing with Noah and Sophia. And with Elaine. I've never wanted to stand in the way of that. "Elaine told me how supportive you've been," he acknowledged. "That can't have been easy." "It wasn't about easy," I found myself explaining. "It was about what Marcus needed, what was best for him." "That's what real parenting is, isn't it?" Cameron observed quietly. "Putting their needs ahead of your comfort. Something I'm only now beginning to understand." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, evolving from initial awkwardness into something unexpected. Not friendship, certainly, but a kind of respectful understanding between two men connected by their care for the same young man, albeit in very different ways. Cameron shared candidly about his struggle with addiction, how it had begun in college with recreational use that spiraled out of control, ultimately costing him his relationship with Janine and his role in Marcus's life. He spoke of the years of denial, of blaming others for consequences he'd brought upon himself, of the painful clarity that had finally come with his latest recovery effort. "I know I can never make up for the years I missed," he said toward the end of our call. "And I'm not trying to insert myself into Marcus's life in a way that disrupts what you've built. I just want the chance to know him, in whatever capacity he's comfortable with." "That's his decision to make," I said. "And I trust him to make it thoughtfully." "Because you raised him to think for himself," Cameron observed. "To understand complex situations and make good choices. That's no small thing." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room, processing the unexpected conversation. There had been no dramatic confrontation, no competition for Marcus's loyalty, none of the scenarios I've been bracing myself for over the past year. Instead, there had been simple recognition of reality, that Marcus had room in his life for multiple influences, multiple relationships, each offering something different and valuable. The following weekend, Marcus came home for a brief visit, bringing with him a thick stack of research papers and the perpetual hunger of a college student. As we sat at the kitchen table late Sunday morning, sharing a brunch I'd prepared, he looked up from his plate with a tentative expression. "So, I heard you and Cameron talked," he said, clearly aiming for casual but missing the mark slightly. I nodded, buttering a piece of toast. "We did. Good conversation, actually. He mentioned it during our last call, said he was grateful for the chance to thank you directly." Marcus studied me closely. "Was it weird? Talking to him?" "Less weird than I expected," I admitted. "He seems genuinely committed to his recovery. And to respecting our relationship." Marcus looked visibly relieved. "I was worried it might be awkward for you. All of this, me getting to know him, the calls, everything. It would be stranger if it weren't sometimes awkward," I pointed out. "We're navigating uncharted territory here. There's no instruction manual for this particular family configuration." He smiled at that. "True. But we're figuring it out, aren't we?" "One day at a time," I agreed, echoing the recovery mantra I'd heard so often over the past year. Later that afternoon, as Marcus packed up to return to campus, he hesitated in the doorway of his bedroom, a familiar expression on his face, the one he'd worn as a child when building up courage to ask for something important. "Dad? There's something I wanted to run by you." "Of course," I said, setting aside the laundry I'd been folding. "What's up?" "Thanksgiving break is coming up in a few weeks," he began, "and I was thinking, what if we invited Elaine and the kids to join us? Not Cameron. He'll still be in the residential program. But just them. They don't have other family nearby and—" He trailed off, looking uncertain. I considered the suggestion carefully. Our Thanksgiving traditions had always been simple but meaningful. Just the two of us in recent years, though we usually joined neighbors or friends for the actual meal. The idea of expanding our small circle to include Elaine, Noah, and Sophia represented another significant step in this evolving family narrative. "I think that would be nice," I said finally. "If they're comfortable with it, I'd be happy to host them." The smile that spread across Marcus's face was worth any potential awkwardness the arrangement might create. "Really? You're sure?" "Really," I confirmed. "Family takes many forms, Marcus. Sometimes it's the one you're born into, sometimes it's the one you choose, and sometimes, like in our case, it's the one you build, piece by piece as circumstances change." He crossed the room and hugged me suddenly, a genuine, heartfelt embrace, without the adolescent hesitation that had characterized so many of our interactions in recent years. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." As November arrived, bringing with it the crisp air and early darkness of late autumn, our Thanksgiving plans evolved from a simple invitation into a full family gathering. Elaine had accepted gratefully, offering to bring several dishes to contribute to the meal. Noah and Sophia, according to their mother, were beside themselves with excitement about visiting their big brother's house. The days leading up to the holiday were filled with preparations, cleaning rarely used guest rooms, digging out extra blankets and towels, planning a menu that would accommodate everyone's preferences. I found myself unexpectedly energized by the activity, realizing how much I had missed the bustle and warmth of a house preparing to welcome loved ones. The morning before Thanksgiving, as I was inventorying the refrigerator to ensure we had all necessary ingredients, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery person with a large flower arrangement, autumn blooms in warm oranges and deep reds, arranged in a ceramic cornucopia. The card read simply, "For bringing Marcus into this world, Janine deserves much of the credit. For raising him to be the remarkable young man he is, that honor belongs entirely to you. With deepest respect and gratitude, Cameron." I placed the arrangement on the dining table, where it would serve as a centerpiece for our meal the following day. The gesture was unexpected but oddly fitting, a tangible acknowledgement of the complex, interconnected relationships that had shaped all our lives. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold, sunlight glinting off the first dusting of snow on the lawn. Marcus was up early, helping with last-minute preparations and frequently checking his phone for updates on Elaine's journey. "They've just turned onto our street," he announced finally, heading for the front door with barely contained excitement. I followed at a more measured pace, watching from the doorway as Marcus greeted Elaine with a warm hug, then crouched down to receive the enthusiastic embraces of Noah and Sophia, who had clearly been counting the minutes until they could see their adored older brother. Elaine approached the house more hesitantly, carrying a covered dish and wearing an expression that mixed gratitude with slight apprehension. "Richard, thank you so much for having us," she said as she reached the door. "This is incredibly generous of you." "I'm glad you could come," I said sincerely, stepping aside to welcome them in. Marcus has been looking forward to introducing Noah and Sophia to all his favorite spots around the house. As if on cue, Marcus called from the backyard, where he was already showing the children the old tire swing that had been his own favorite at their age. Their delighted squeals drifted through the open door, a sound of pure joy that immediately lightened the atmosphere. Elaine noticed the flower arrangement as we entered the dining room. "Those are beautiful," she commented. "They arrived yesterday," I explained. "From Cameron, actually." Her expression registered surprise, then thoughtful approval. "He's different this time," she said quietly. "The program, the counseling. Something's finally clicking. I've seen him go through the motions before, say all the right words without really changing. But this feels genuine. I hope so, I said. For all your sakes, especially the children. She nodded, understanding that my concern extended beyond Marcus to include her younger children as well. One day at a time, as they say. The meal itself was a blend of traditions. My standard turkey and stuffing, Elaine's family recipe for sweet potato casserole, Marcus's favorite cranberry sauce made from Janine's recipe. Noah and Sophia, initially shy, gradually warmed up as the meal progressed, eagerly sharing stories about school and friends once they realized I was genuinely interested. "Mr. Richard," Sophia asked suddenly during a lull in conversation, "are you our stepdad too, since you're Marcus's dad?" Quote, the innocent question created a moment of startled silence at the table. Elaine looked mortified, but I found myself smiling at the child's straightforward logic. "Not exactly," I explained gently. "I'm Marcus's dad because I raised him and we chose to be family. Your dad is still your dad. He's just getting better right now so he can be the best dad possible." She considered this with the serious concentration only a 6-year-old can muster. "But you're still our family, right? Because Marcus is our brother." "That's a good way to put it," I agreed, catching Elaine's grateful look across the table. "We're connected as family through Marcus." This seemed to satisfy her, and the conversation moved on to other topics. But the simple exchange stayed with me. This child's intuitive understanding of how relationships can transcend conventional boundaries, creating connections where none might otherwise exist. After dinner, as Elaine and I cleared dishes while Marcus entertained the children in the living room, she paused, hands deep in soapy water. "I wasn't sure this would work," she admitted. "It's such an unusual situation, but seeing them together." She nodded toward the living room, where Marcus was teaching Noah and Sophia a card game at the coffee table. "I'm glad we took the chance." "Me too," I said, surprised to realize how deeply I meant it. They need these connections. All of them do. Later that evening, after Elaine and the children had settled into the guest rooms for their 2-night stay, Marcus and I sat on the back porch, bundled against the chill, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "Thank you for today," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. "For welcoming them, for making this work." "It was my pleasure," I assured him. "They're wonderful kids. And Elaine is remarkably resilient, given everything she's dealing with." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "When I first found those letters from Cameron, I thought I was discovering some secret that would explain everything about my life. Why I sometimes felt like I didn't quite belong. Why certain things were hard for me." He looked up at the stars, but the truth is, there was never a simple answer. No magic revelation that would suddenly make everything make sense. Life rarely offers those. I agreed. "What I've realized is that belonging isn't something you find," he continued. "It's something you create, through connections, and choices, and showing up for people." He turned to look at me directly. "You taught me that, Dad. By example. Every single day." The simple truth of his words resonated deeply. In the aftermath of Janine's death, during Marcus's turbulent adolescence, through the crisis that had nearly torn us apart, I had simply continued showing up, day after day, offering love and guidance, even when they were rejected or unappreciated. "The funny thing is," Marcus added with a soft laugh, "when I was researching hereditary aspects of addiction for my biology project, I discovered something interesting about DNA." "What's that?" I asked. "Scientists have found that environmental factors can actually influence how genes are expressed, which ones are activated, and which ones stay dormant. It's called epigenetics." His expression grew thoughtful. "So even though I have Cameron's DNA, the environment you created for me, the stability, the values you taught, the way you loved me, that actually shaped how those genes express themselves." Biology and environment working together, I observed. Exactly. Nature and nurture, intertwined. He smiled. "So in a way, you've influenced not just who I am emotionally and intellectually, but physically too. Pretty cool, right?" The insight struck me as profoundly beautiful. This scientific validation of what I'd always believed intuitively, that love and presence can shape a child's development as powerfully as genetic inheritance. The following spring, nearly 18 months after that fateful argument in our kitchen, I stood among proud parents and family members at State University's honors ceremony, watching as Marcus received an award for his research project on family dynamics in addiction recovery. The project had grown out of his personal experience, combining scientific rigor with deep empathy for both those struggling with addiction and the families caught in its wake. As he accepted the certificate, his eyes found mine in the audience, a silent acknowledgement of the journey that had brought us to this moment. Beside me sat Elaine and the children, who had made the 2-hour drive to celebrate Marcus's achievement. Noah clutched a handmade sign reading, "Way to go, big brother," in wobbly letters decorated with enthusiastic glitter. After the ceremony, as we gathered for photos, Marcus surprised me by placing his award in my hands. "This belongs to you too," he said simply. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Later at the celebration dinner, Marcus stood to make a toast. Looking around the table at our unconventional gathering, me, Elaine, Noah, Sophia, and several of his college friends, he raised his glass. "To family," he said, "in all its complicated, beautiful forms. To second chances and new beginnings. And to the people who show up, day after day, creating belonging through the simple act of presence." As glasses clinked around the table, I caught Elaine's eye across the flower arrangement, another gift from Cameron, who was now 6 months sober and working his recovery program with renewed commitment. She smiled, a look of understanding passing between us. Two people who had found themselves unexpectedly connected through circumstances neither of us would have chosen, yet who had discovered unexpected grace in the connection. That night, driving home alone after dropping Marcus back at his dormitory, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. What had begun as a crisis, a son's angry rejection, a family narrative fracturing under the weight of hidden truths, had transformed into something I could never have anticipated. An expanded understanding of what family could be, of how love transcends biological connections and conventional boundaries. The road hadn't always been smooth. There had been difficult conversations, painful revelations, moments of doubt and frustration. But through it all, one truth had remained constant. That family isn't defined by DNA or legal documents, by perfect outcomes or uncomplicated feelings, but by the daily choice to show up, to love, to remain present even when, especially when, it's difficult. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a light on in the house. Marcus must have forgotten to turn it off before returning to campus. But when I opened the front door, I found instead a small package on the entry table, wrapped in simple brown paper with my name written in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Marcus, at about age 7, sitting on my shoulders at a county fair, his small hands gripping my forehead, both of us laughing at something beyond the camera's view. Beside it was a new photo, taken just months ago. Marcus standing between Noah and Sophia, all three wearing identical goofy grins, his arms protectively around their shoulders. The note attached read, "Found the original while cleaning out my dorm room. Thought you might like to see how the story continues. Love always, your son, Marcus." In that simple phrase, "your son," lay all the affirmation any father could ever need. Not a claim based on biology or legal definitions, but a choice freely made. A bond forged through years of ordinary moments and extraordinary challenges. Family, I reflected as I carefully placed both frames on the mantel, is ultimately about choice. The choice to love, to commit, to remain present through all of life's complexities. Biology may determine where a story begins, but it's love that writes the chapters that truly matter. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.